Hey, friends. I'm going to do a little lesson on, gosh, all kinds of stuff. But today, it's mainly adding, subtracting um, with decimals, because a lot of you are working on that kind of stuff. And I just want to give you some pro tips. Okay, first of all, I want to write this problem up and see if you can tell me what my mistake is. First of all, it's a test uh, to see if you can see my board okay. See my board okay? It looks okay. Got a little light up in there, huh? Okay, 132 plus 8. 132 plus 8 is what? Come on, people. It's 140, right? But let's say I did this. Can you see my mistake? It's that an 8 is a single digit. It's in the ones position. You could place an 8 using your hands, right? You can make 8, you can see it. 132, of course, is in the hundreds. 100, 3 tens, and 2 ones. So what is my error here when I added these two? It is two words. Place value. Agreed? Place value is the key to adding and subtracting numbers, right? Now, that seems super simple, right? And it is. It should be. It is. It is. It's super simple. Isn't it simple, Hannah?
Very simple.
See, even she knows. She loves math.
Even so the English major.
Yeah. Okay. Now, is that color okay for you kids? Okay. Now let's talk about. We've done this before, but let's talk about adding decimals. Adding with decimals. So first thing I'm going to do, and this is going to be kind of weird, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say 3/4. Okay. If we have 3/4 of the items, we do not have all of it. We have only 3 out of the 4 parts of it. Pizza is always nice to think about because we can relate to that. In fact, I'm going to make pizza tonight. Hannah doesn't know that, but I'm making gluten-free because my wife's gluten-free crust pizza, and it's usually pretty tasty. Okay, why did I go there? Oh, pizza, 3/4, 3/4. But one thing I want to ask you, what is 3/4 as a decimal, right? So now we start to think in terms of percentages, decimals and percentages. And if you may know, if we think of pizza, and let's also think of a dollar. Okay, $1, $1. And if we think about a dollar and we think about money, it's really easy because the dollar is based on the hundred system to break it into parts that relate to fractions and percentages. So what is 3/4 of a dollar? What is it, Hannah? What's 3/4 of a dollar? 75 cents. So we go 0.75. And we see, we can write that as dollars, 0.75, or we can write 75 cents. Now, what's nice about that in relation to our pizza is we can quickly take our 3/4, right, and make it as a decimal number. Now, when we talk about percentages, we also can say 75% is 3/4, 75%. Now, percent. Put the E first. Cent, percent, as in per hundred. Percent, per hundred. So 75 out of the 100 parts, okay, is 75%. And again, I think dollars, that's kind of a handy little tool. Now, the way we can make this decimal from this fraction is 2 different ways. One is to rename 3/4 into a number that has 100 as our base, our per hundred, right? Percent. So, and that converts to our decimal. Well, 4 times what makes 100? 4 times what makes 100? 4 times 25, right? And remember the magic one, meaning it's 25 over 25 is the number 1. And we're multiplying 3/4 by 1. So we're not changing the value of 3/4. We're just renaming it into a different looking fraction. Well, 3 times 25 is 75. 75 hundredths. Then we think place value, 75 hundredths. And this is where the whole place value is so critical. We have no ones because we don't have the whole pizza, do we? We don't have one whole pizza. We only have 3/4 of the pizza, right? So it's less than 1. And in fact, it's on this side of the decimal. And we've got 7 tenths and 5 hundredths, 75 hundredths. Okay, 75 hundredths. See how that all relates? The second way to do that is to make a division problem, dividing the numerator by the denominator. That's a little more complicated method than using the magic 1. So I'm going to hold off on that for this particular lesson because we really want us to look at adding and subtracting with decimals. So let's go ahead and keep our 75 because that was our focus right there. So we're going to go 0.75. Now, some people tell you got to have the 0, got to have the 0. I'm kind of like, hey, if I got the decimal, I don't 0 is just more to have on my page, if you will. But that's because I recognize this is 0.75 without the 0. You can put more zeros in front if you want. You can put more zeros in back. It's not going to change the fact that it's the 75 hundredths. Okay. Let's now add to this 75 hundredths 25 hundredths, or 0.25. Now, if we add those two together, probably a lot of you are going, oh, come on, are you serious? That's so easy. Well, if 75 plus 25, I can actually ignore the decimal if you want at this point and just do an addition problem, right? And if I go 5 plus 5 is 10, and I regroup my 1 in the tens column, 7 plus 2 is 9, plus that 1 is 10. Now, here's the trick. Because that's 100, it's all about place value. We have our hundredths, our tenths, and our ones. When I wrote this 3-digit number down now, I actually end up with 1. Okay, because I added these two numbers that are beneath 1 together, but they created one whole. Okay, so now it's critical when I do add or subtract with any numbers, but particularly in decimals too, is that I line up my place value. You see what happens. Now my decimals come straight down. So this will be the same case with subtraction. So now let's look at something a little different. Let's say that we only have 8 100ths. And if you say the place value, then you can usually write the number pretty simply because you think place value. It's not a 1, it's not a 10, it's not a 100. It's not tenths, but instead it's hundredths, 8 hundredths. There it is, 8 hundredths. Okay, if the 8 was here, that'd be 80 hundredths. That'd be 8 tenths or 80 hundredths. Remember that. I want to go there. Okay, now let's say that you're going to add to this 5 hundredths. Okay, so 5 hundredths. So we're going to say addition problem. We're going to make sure our place value is lined up. That's all that really matters here. And we're going to go ahead and do the addition problem or the subtraction problem. Wouldn't matter, right? 8 plus 5 to take 2 from there, put it there to get it to is 8 plus 13, right? So I'm going to regroup my 1 and add those up and then make sure I keep my decimal. It's all about place value. Now, what if you were adding a whole number or a mixed number, whole number with a decimal? Same process, line up your place value. So let's say I'm going to add a whole number to a decimal. And let's say, let's just make up a decimal, it doesn't really matter. So let's say it's 0.23, so 23 hundredths, right? 23 hundredths. And let's say we're going to add 5 to it. Okay, 5 plus 23 hundredths. Well, 5 is what in terms of place value? 5 ones. Now it looks kind of funny on paper, doesn't it, a little bit? So you do that. It's just critical. And it's really not that difficult if you think about it now. Add up your numbers as long as your place value is perfectly in line. Now try to keep it kind of neat in your columns. Decimals here, because I don't have anything here, put some zeros in there. And that's going to be 2 and 5.23. Okay, so it's pretty simple. When it gets tricky, and it doesn't have to be tricky, is if you said something like, hey, it's 3 hundredths, and then maybe it's going to be 1.8. Okay, so 3 hundredths. Well, remember, when you write 3 hundredths down, you got to write it in just the hundred spot. Okay, nothing in the tens, nothing in the ones. And then I said 1.2, right? Well, in this case, I'm going to put the 1. Let me get rid of this just so it's nice and clear to you. In the 1 in the 1 spot, 0.2 tenths, 2 tenths. Notice my decimal. Place value, ones, tenths, hundreds. There's nothing after 2. Certainly throw a 0 in there, no problem, because 20 hundredths is no different than 2 tenths. Let me take that little sub conversation over here. 2 tenths is equivalent to 20 hundredths. You can see this in a couple ways. One is you can see that I just put a 0 on the end of these, but also as my magic 1 of 10 over 10, that converts this to 20 hundredths. So putting the 0 there does not change the value at all of 2 tenths. Okay? And then just add them up. 3, 2, 1, 1.23. A little bit over 1, but quite a bit less than 2. Same goes for subtraction. It's all about place value. Understanding decimals and what decimals mean. And basically, if you just think of decimals as a fraction, so if we had 2/5, we can convert using the magic 1 to tenths, because tenths and hundreds are really where the place value is, right? By multiplying by 2 over 2, 4 tenths, and so that then converts to 0.4 or 4 tenths, right there, the tenth spot, okay? Plenty of place value lessons out there, plenty of place value resources in terms of like number lines and stuff to get your place value correct. But remember, the key is, in addition to subtraction, really with any numbers, is getting your place value lined up in columns, and then the numbers will work themselves out handsomely. Okay, that is just part of a lesson. It's just a fraction of math. Get that? It's a fraction joke. It's not that